Welcome everybody to Efficiency Canada's weekly discovery session. My name is Corey Diamond. I'm the Executive Director at Efficiency Canada, and I am pinch hitting today for Natalie Irwin. So if you are expecting to see Natalie, she's enjoying a well-deserved day off, and you'll see her again next week. I am absolutely thrilled today to be joined by the really good people at the IESO in Ontario, not just because they're good people, but also because they're going to be talking about something really innovative and something that I've been following in other jurisdictions for probably the better part of a decade, which is Canada's first energy efficiency auction. And so today we're going to hear about this auction and how it tests the ways to increase energy efficiency's contribution to the grid and to support consumers in designing, better solutions that may fit their needs. The auction attracted a wide range of organizations proposing. I think it was oversubscribed, which is an excellent sign. And everything from different kinds of technologies to thermal storage, to retrofits, to machinery upgrades. So you're gonna hear all about that today. But we're gonna follow the exact process we always follow, which is a 20 to 25 minute presentation from the IESO, and then opening it up for Q&A. So get your questions ready, and you can use the chat function or the Q&A function, and I'll facilitate those questions. And as always, we have one golden rule, which is for our presenters and for the audience, which is absolutely no sales pitches. So try to keep those and avoid it on today's session. So without further ado, let's introduce Bronwen Smith, Katelyn Margerm, and to open up, I'll pass it over to Nick Schruder from the IESO.
Thank you, Corey. So I am also super excited and honored to be able to speak here at the Discovery Sessions. I've been a longtime listener, first-time caller, so I'm really pumped to be here and present today. I'm particularly excited to be here to speak about this new approach, as Corey has mentioned, to energy efficiency, where we piloted this year, which promotes more consumer-driven solutions that benefit our electricity grid. So in a nutshell, what's the so what of this project? We are trying to take this energy efficiency resource that we love and we know, one step further in its evolution to better meeting our system needs. Do I think this auction will be the only way we will procure energy efficiency in the future? No. But do I believe it has potential to be part of a solution, a portfolio of solutions that will help address our system needs? Yes. I see this auction pilot as complementing our current, IESO's current suite of Save on Energy programs, which are focused on cost-effectively meeting system needs, driving cost competitiveness, and promoting consumer-driven solutions. Now, I won't steal a thunder from my esteemed colleagues who are much more intelligent and knowledgeable on the details of this pilot than I am. So let me pass it over to Bronwen Smith, and Katelyn will dive more into the details right now. So over to you, Bronwen.
Great, thanks, Nick. And before we jump into the details of the pilot, I'm just going to spend a minute just giving a little bit of background about the IESO for those of you who are not as familiar with the organization. So there we go. So the IESO is the Independent Electricity System Operator in Ontario. Kind of its primary responsibility is the reliable operation of the electricity grid in Ontario, kind of meeting the needs of the system on a 24/7 basis, as well as then planning for future electricity system needs kind of across different time frames, and enabling competition and administering the markets then that are used to acquire or procure the resources to meet those system needs. One thing that is unique about the IESO compared to some other system operators is our role in CDM and delivering CDM programming for the province. And so on that note, there's obviously a long history of CDM programs in Ontario. We have 2021 is a big year for us. We're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of our Save on Energy brand. And this is the brand that's been used for the last 10 years to deliver the CDM programs under and across, we've had 4 different conservation frameworks in the last 10 years. We've just launched our new 2021 to 2024 CDM framework. And this new framework's really focused on how do we deliver CDM programs that help meet both customer needs as well as the system's needs in a cost-effective manner. And this framework is delivered by the IESO. And just a little bit more background on the framework itself. It's a 4-year framework that was launched in January, a budget just under $700 million. As I mentioned, it's centrally delivered by the IESO under the Save on Energy brand. The majority of the programming under this framework is focused towards business customers, commercial, institutional, industrial customers, although there is a carve out for some residential programming that is specifically targeted to both low income customer or consumers as well as on reserve First Nations communities. And the launch of this new framework, it's really, I'd say, a step forward in kind of our evolution of how we look at CDM programs and energy efficiency as a resource. We're really focusing through this framework and through the programs to see how can we, use energy efficiency as a resource and through the delivery of these programs to help us meet our system needs, whether those are kind of at the bulk system, regional level, local needs. And, the majority of those needs for the system right now are capacity needs. And so how do we target our programs to meet those kind of peak demand needs of the system rather than only focusing on the energy savings? And a few different ways we're trying to demonstrate or show energy efficiency as a resource. Lots of focus on kind of the different competitive mechanisms that we can use to acquire the resource, looking at competitive procurements, call for proposals, trying to spur innovation through soliciting customer-based solutions, all with the aim of trying to drive, improve cost effectiveness and kind of drive costs down. Also through this framework, kind of trying to mirror our timing and our offerings with when the system needs are occurring. So the budget in the first 2 years of the framework is a little bit lower. It increases in the second half of the framework as we see more substantial system needs starting to emerge. And then finally, what we're here to talk about today, this EE auction pilot, although it's not part of this new framework, it's kind of a parallel initiative where we're, again, looking to see how can we acquire and use energy efficiency to meet some of our system needs. And so with that, I'll just give a bit of background on the pilot before I pass it over to Katelyn to go through all the details. This energy efficiency auction pilot, it was set up as a one-time auction, really looking to test to see, can we use an auction mechanism like we use, for our capacity auction to procure energy efficiency resources to build some understanding of what future possibilities there might be for the use of this type of mechanism. And so the pilot is procuring sustained demand reductions within specific hours across 2 obligation periods. So winter 2022-23 and summer 2023. And those demand reductions are coming from or can be offered from eligible energy efficiency and non-dispatchable load shifting projects. The budget for this pilot, it's relatively modest compared to our, overall or our CDM framework budget of 700 million, where we had $5 million for this pilot that came from IESO's Grid Innovation Fund. The auction was held this past March, and the resources need to be fully implemented in advance of those 2 obligation periods. And just finally, before we get into more of the details, like what are we trying to learn from this, this pilot? There's kind of 4 key things. We're trying to understand, is there the interest and ability of the marketplace, of participants to bring forward projects and, energy efficiency opportunities through an auction mechanism. The second, one of the benefits of an auction is it allows that price discovery element. So we really understand what are the costs needed to deliver savings, these demand reductions. Third, because we're through this auction trying to demonstrate the ability of energy efficiency as a resource to meet system needs, we want to understand, we need to have confidence that these savings are real and are going to be there when the system needs it. So testing out the strengths and weaknesses of the M&V procedures we have to really validate that these savings are happening and can be depended on. And finally, just recognizing that energy efficiency and demand side resources are different than other supply side resources that could be used to meet system needs. So trying to understand what are the unique characteristics and considerations that we need to better understand if we want to look at future opportunities for energy efficiency to compete to meet some of the future needs of the system. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katelyn to jump into more of the details and the results from the pilot.
Thanks, Bronwen. So I'll just describe a little bit about the pilot design and results and some of the initial findings. As Bronwen mentioned, the pilot was designed with quite a bit of stakeholder input through IESO's more formal stakeholder engagement process. So we posted a high-level design and a detailed design and got comments from stakeholders on both phases or both documents. And the resulting design was a pilot that aimed to be very open or have limit eligibility restrictions, so it could be open to a really broad set of potential participants, facilities, and projects. So it was open to all sectors, residential, commercial, industrial, and it could be, participants could include facilities owners and managers or aggregators who would contract with facilities to deliver savings. The participants had to be incorporated, and we required them to be able to provide financial statements unless they were a market participant. And the aim there was just to make sure that the businesses were going to be solvent and financially capable of delivering the projects. We also had size restrictions, so minimum capacity of 100 kilowatts for a resource and a maximum of 3.25 megawatts. And the technologies had to be new, so you couldn't have like a contract already in place or purchase order. We want to make sure that the savings are attributable to the auction, and they could include either traditional energy efficiency projects, lighting, motors, pumps, heating and cooling equipment, or it could also resources could also include load shifting measures, like thermal storage or different operational strategies. Measures were not able or not allowed to have received or to receive in the future other incentives from electricity funded incentive programs, but there wasn't any restriction on receiving funds or incentives from say Enbridge or Enercan, and there also can be offered into the capacity auction as long as we can show that the energy efficiency capacity that we're buying through the auction is incremental to any savings delivered through other auctions. And lastly, other technologies like behind the meter or in front of the meter generation or in front of the meter energy efficiency projects were not eligible, and neither was fuel switching. So a little bit more on the pilot design around the kind of auction components. So participants could bid in, there's two commitment windows, winter window, which was from the beginning of November to the end of February 2022-23, or a summer window, as I think Bronwen mentioned, which is beginning of June to end of August in 2023. So they could bid into one of those periods or both of those periods. And the capacity, the energy efficiency capacity is measured as the average demand savings throughout the windows in each of those two seasons. The definitions of times, like in the summertime, it was later in the day, so it's 4 to 9 p.m. In the winter time, it's 4 to 9 p.m. And in the summertime, it's a larger window of 1 to 9 p.m., which is reflective or aligned with our capacity auction and our times of largest demand. So participants that wanted to enter into the auction were able to offer up to 20 different offers for a resource. So they can submit, it's just kind of similar to our capacity auction. They can submit different price quantity pairs. So different capacity values associated with different prices, like dollars per kilowatt. And the idea being to allow participants to kind of reflect any differences in the price as their project scales up or down. The pilot used a pay as offer single round sealed format. So pay as offer is a bit different than our capacity auction. So basically whatever price clears the auction is what participants were paid, their individual offers that cleared, as opposed to our capacity auction where everyone gets the same clearing price, which is based on the highest cleared offer. So happy to talk about that. Just in the interest of time, I'll keep moving, but happy to talk about that design decision after the presentation. And participants could, I mentioned they can submit up to 20 offers. Those offers that they submitted were sealed, so they're not shared publicly or with other participants, and they were all submitted in one round, so as part of the same package. The auction itself, like the auction engine, seeks to maximize capacity years. So, while the obligation or commitment period is just for, those 2 windows that we mentioned in 2022-23, we recognize that those savings are going to persist in the market. Different energy efficiency measures have effective useful lives. Most of the measures that cleared had, around a 10-year effective useful life. So when the offers are entered into the auction, they're prioritized based on dollars per kilowatt year, which recognizes and accounts for the fact that those savings are going to persist, and basically gives priority to projects that are going to stay in the market longer. So the auction engine is aiming to maximize the number of capacity years that we're buying while minimizing that annualized capacity cost, and also considering the budget, which is the $5 million, and the capacity constraint, which is a maximum of 13 megawatts. So that's kind of a lot of information. Happy to talk through the nuances of those different concepts if there's questions at the end of the presentation. And then the M&V procedures allowed either a deemed savings approach, so participants that wanted to submit measures less than 50 kilowatts could take the savings and EUL assumptions from our database of approved assumptions, or if they were larger projects, then they had to follow one of the IPMVP streams. So this was a change that we made during the design period. Initially, the auction was meant to require all resources to submit meter data, interval meter data, and we got feedback from stakeholders that that would be prohibitively expensive and require a lot of effort that would screen out some projects and possibly drive up prices. So the deemed savings approach was, a simpler, it required more effort up front to kind of verify the savings and get our team to review them, but less expense in terms of metering data collection and submission. And the settlements, the payments for the auction are paid out as one-time payments after the auction is completed. So once the M&V reports have been submitted and approved. So participants need to be able to come up with the capital up front to get the projects going, and then they get paid on the back end. So onto the timelines. We've just finished, we're kind of in this midway of 2021. We've just finished the auction. So as mentioned, that's all the contracts have been executed, and we're at the first part of the forward period. So now is the time when participants are going out and finalizing any contract terms with facilities they might be partnering with, and getting their equipment ordered, getting their projects up and running before the obligation or the commitment periods in 2022 and 2023. Onto the results. So as far as as the IESO is concerned, this was a really successful auction, both in terms of the opportunities for pilot learnings. Bronwen highlighted that as a key objective, but also the value of the resources and the prices that we were able to commit. So we cleared 7.4 megawatts of winter capacity and 6.6 megawatts of summer capacity. And we were able to fully commit the budget, that $2.5 million budget per season. It was a capacity constrained auction, so we spent the budget before we hit our capacity cap, which is what we expected to happen. And we had 9 successful providers clear 17 different resources with an average price of $34 per kilowatt year in the winter and just under $39 for summer. So those are really competitive annualized offer prices compared to our full portfolio of CDM business programs. Our levelized unit capacity cost is $155 per kilowatt year. Of course, we should note that this is a $5 million pilot versus, the $170, $180 million we're spending per year on our portfolio. And those, our portfolio of business programs have, a variety of different objectives, as Bronwen and Nick have described, whereas this auction is really just focused on driving down the cost of energy efficiency capacity or demand savings. But all that said, with that goal in mind, we feel we were pretty successful, and we're really happy with the package of resources that have come through so far. So I'll just talk a little bit more about the participants and the resources that cleared. So we had a range of participants, which is really great to see. We had energy solutions providers and aggregators. So some of these are participants that are coming over from our former demand response and capacity auction. So that's kind of a nice feature, that the energy efficiency auction pilot is kind of bridging some of those capacity auction participants into the energy efficiency or CDM space. We also had good representation from institutional customers or consumers, especially those that have participated in our programs in the past. Our energy manager program was a really helpful way to kind of build capacity, and we did, I think the capacity that we built through that program came in really handy here to help us get some of these projects submitted. And we had 1 industrial participant as well. So very good representation here. As far as the resources themselves, we had a good broad set of resources submitted. So it included some more traditional energy efficiency technologies like lighting, compressors, pumps and motor equipment. But we did also get some, as well as the more process-oriented recommissioning and control optimization. And we also got a few larger projects through our institutional and industrial customers that were kind of more unique and enabled by the auction pilot, a compressed air pipeline replacement. And this thermal energy storage system is a unique one in that it's taking advantage of the eligibility of load shifting, which is, doesn't tend to fit or have a home in our CDM programs. So that's really great to see as well. As far as initial findings, we're kind of in the process now of, reaching out to successful participants, but also those that we thought might have wanted to join the auction and didn't end up submitting offers, to get feedback on the design and delivery, and just see, really to make sure that we capture those lessons learned that are that part of that central objective and focus of the pilot. But some initial, conversations and feedback we've received, we can see from the offers that there's, strong interest from a diverse set of energy efficiency and DR participants. And I think, as I mentioned, the auction providing a path for DR providers into the energy efficiency space, but also, lots of comments from customers that are and consumers that are more frequent, or that we've seen in the past participate in our CDM programs. Lots of comments that, they see that this is kind of the future of where energy efficiency is headed in Ontario and other jurisdictions. Looking to expecting that there will be more of these market type mechanisms, so wanting to be proactive in participating and developing the capacity within their organizations to deliver these types of services. We also got feedback that the openness of the pilot to this broad set of sectors and measures created a lot of opportunities for projects that would not have necessarily fit within our CDM programs, and that helped to increase the amount of capacity that was offered and drive down the prices. Some barriers to participation was the budget, $5 million total budget, and $1.25 million per project, may not have been generous enough or a large enough amount for some very large, say, industrial customers to show up. Though, it was enough for many others that did come through. And the fact that it was a one-time auction was a bit challenging because it does take a lot of effort and resources to get familiar with a pilot. Though, we're interested in what the opportunities are to leverage these types of mechanisms in the future. We don't currently have, a commitment in place to deliver auctions moving forward. So, and also the requirement to provide financial statements was challenging for some newer companies. One other complication or challenging factor was just that the pilot was taking place at a time when we were also, our new framework was announced, directed, and our programs are being announced. So there's a lot of information for participants to take in around what those offerings entailed and just trying to balance the benefits and opportunities of the different programs. So there's a lot of decisions to be made in a short amount of time. But despite all that, we were able to get really competitive set of offers, as I mentioned, and a very competitive average clearing price with diverse range of technologies and participants that I've spoken to. So lastly, just as far as next steps, I've mentioned that we're holding feedback sessions with stakeholders and successful participants just to get feedback on the auction design and implementation. We're compiling some lessons learned from that qualitative input and also doing some more quantitative analysis of the offers we've received. And we'll feed that information into our midterm review for a framework that we're in now. And our successful participants are now developing all their projects in lead up to the commitment period. And I think, as Nick has described, and we can continue to discuss in the QA, this is just one mechanism as part of our kind of broader CDM objectives to continue to identify opportunities to advance competitive mechanisms. And we'll also be launching our local initiatives program and a new industrial call for proposals during this framework that will have strong competitive elements as well. So that's it. That's all I had to say, but I'm happy to answer any questions or talk about any of those pieces in more detail.
Great. Thank you, all three of you. That was very comprehensive, but in a very short period of time. And so it's hard to pass on all the detailed information. And we're already starting to get a bunch of questions in that can go a little bit deeper. One is just around the mechanics of the actual auction. Like, I'm assuming this isn't an auctioneer who's kind of like doing it. So just maybe give us a very quick example of like how the transaction works and the process works in those 2 days that it's open.
Yeah, I can start. My boyfriend calls me an auctioneer and does the auctioneer voice to me a lot when he tries to understand what it is that I'm doing at my computer all day. But yeah, the offers were submitted in a spreadsheet format. So basically between the 22nd and 23rd of March, the participants put together a spreadsheet, and it just basically had a row for each offer, one spreadsheet for each resource. And they said, this is the capacity. I'm going to submit 100 kilowatts, 200 kilowatts, 300 kilowatts of demand savings. And this is the price for that quantity, and with like a little description of what the resource is and what the effective useful life is. So it's like one spreadsheet that we then compile and feed into our big algorithm that prioritizes all those components that I mentioned and spits out the successful offers.
Great, thank you for that. That makes sense. A couple questions just around kind of like calculating and verifying. So David asked kind of how you calculate the peak for each period specifically from building envelopes. And Victor is asking kind of how you verify that the actual reductions from the successful bidders actually occurred. And then what happens if it doesn't? Like what's the recourse?
Yeah, so the peak is calculated. It's the average demand savings over the commitment windows. So it's those winter months and those summer months in the hours that I described. So basically what's the total energy that's saved over those hours divided by the total number of hours. So like the average total capacity demand reduction during the windows. And the M&V process, we have like a whole procedures document on the webpage that folks can go through, but there's kind of the two streams to verify what the savings are. Either you can do it based on calculations if it's a small measure, or you do it based on metering if it's a larger measure, and you submit those measurement and verification plans and reports to us if the measures under deliver. So you don't provide the full capacity that you've committed. Say you said I'm going to deliver 100 kilowatts, but you only deliver 90, your payment is reduced at 2 times the price that's cleared. So yeah, so there's like a penalty there to discourage people from overcommitting and making sure that the commitments are conservative and achievable.
Great. Yeah, that was one of my questions too. So thanks for that. Brian asked, for the more conventional measures that were listed, for example, I think there was some lighting that was allowed as part of it. What incentive was there for proponents to enroll in the auction instead of just going through the standard kind of save on energy programs?
I can start this one. I think this is a question we got from a lot of interested participants. It's, weighing from their perspective the business case of going through our save on energy programs versus through the auction. And so we tried to help support that, but that was really kind of the participants trying to weigh to see, where they thought there might be the better opportunity for them, given the nature of the program. As Katelyn mentioned, this was a little bit difficult in terms of the timing because we were launching a new framework with new programs at the same time as we were running the auction. So, potential participants were trying to get up to speed on both. I think the auction, gives the participants the option to tell us how much do they like to offer in different quantities of bids and prices to say, this is how much I need to deliver this amount of savings. So it lets them kind of dictate what they need, whereas through our programs right now, we kind of have set incentives for different types of technologies or projects. So that's, less or more defined.
Got it. Okay. There's a couple questions here that I'm going to combine. It looks like maybe Nick, you may have answered it, but I'll combine it, Arif and Yasmin. So certainly this pilot was designed to procure energy savings, but oftentimes there are other social, or equity measurements that can also be included. So the first part of that question was any thoughts around how this could support other kinds of issues impacting Indigenous communities, but also for, let's say, income qualified, your income qualified CDM programs, and taking into account that maybe the price can be adjusted for this based on all these other benefits that accrue when you do this. So I don't know if anyone wants to kind of tackle those two things together.
Sure, I can start. I mean, I think, maybe this is kind of what Nick was alluding to at the beginning. This is one mechanism we can use to try to procure energy efficiency, but isn't necessarily going to be the only option or mechanism we'd want to use in the future. I think an auction mechanism is really great at kind of discovering what is that true cost that's needed to acquire the services or the savings you're looking for, but it is harder to layer on some of those other social considerations that are included in some of our other programs under our framework, where we're able to, carve out specific budgets for programs that, are aimed to help meet system needs, but also meet other customer or social benefits as well. And within our framework, there is latitude around cost effectiveness of those programs and different mechanisms that we're able to use to make sure those programs are kind of meeting those additional policy and social considerations.
Great, thank you. Richard's asking around kind of, the implications of the auction offer price being so much lower than what the CDM levelized cost is. So it's around $35 kilowatt per year versus 155. So like maybe just talk about a little bit about the price, why it was set like that, and how it differs so much from the levelized cost.
Yeah, I mean, I think Katelyn alluded to this a little bit in the presentation, but I mean, I think we have to be a little bit cautious when we're doing straight comparisons. We're super excited about the average price that we got for the auction, and it is very competitive when we look at it in comparison to some other mechanisms or tools, but we have to be mindful of what's different. And this $5 million offering, we were able to, receive a lot of very low cost bids for certain projects and certain resources. I think it shows that there's still a lot of low hanging fruit out there that we were able to capture effectively through the auction. Obviously, with our framework and our suite of business programs under that framework, it's a much bigger scale, larger scale. And so, as you're looking at acquiring more, obviously you're going up that cost curve. And so I think some of that is reflected in the price difference, as well as there are other factors that we're considering when we're designing the program in terms of trying to target specific customer types, like, small business or others, and other kind of policy considerations within our programs that also influence the levelized costs of that, as well as, I think certain programs looking to capture other benefits as well.
One point that I'll add on there too that I didn't mention in the presentation is that that's the weighted average price of the committed resources, so what cleared the auction, but we do have to see what actually gets delivered and what comes out at the other side. Do all of those resources get implemented? Do they all make it through payment? So when we get to our evaluations at the end of the auction, that's when we'll see what the real costs and benefits were.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just on that, like, I think some people may be curious, so how many, are you able to say how many applications you got and how, like, versus the 9 that you chose?
Yeah, we had, was it 19 resources enrolled from 10 participants? But we did have like a much larger number of offers. As I mentioned, there's 20 offers per resource. So so we were choosing from a pretty large number of individual offers as well.
Yeah, great interest. Okay, cool. Okay, so Jesse out in Alberta is asking around kind of, why choose to pay as offer as opposed to pay based on the clearing price, likely the capacity, like you do for the capacity auction. And I think that's related to what David's asking too, just how this compares to the demand response that was paid out before. But maybe that's two separate things.
Yeah, I guess firstly, just on the pay as offer versus pay as clear, like I think our markets team would suggest that pay as clear is like the most optimal way of designing and running an auction in the longer term. So it helps produce, the most cost-effective set of bids and resources. But for a pilot, I think what helps get those optimal and efficient offers is the amount of information from past offers and to participants about what the price is of delivering energy efficiency capacity in this format in this jurisdiction. So since we don't have like this pilot was meant to do some of that price discovery, there's not a lot of available information. So we did the pay as offer, which also helps us avoid overpaying for resources. So if people are telling us this is how much I need to get my projects past this, over this hurdle or to get this ROI that I'm targeting, then that's the amount that we want to pay, especially given we don't want to be paying extra, especially given that this was just a limited budget auction. But the pay as clear is a good strategy for, I think a more established auction for sure.
Great. Scott in the chat, first of all, applauds you for your celebration of Pride Month, which I thought was great too. So congrats on that. And he has a question as well, which is around kind of a pilot and if any participants are able to kind of stack other incentives, either from programs from the IESO or even, let's say, from the federal government or Enbridge or others. So I just want to just kind of maybe talk us through that to see like our projects able to kind of bring multiple levels of funding together.
Yeah, just the main restriction was not stacking electricity ratepayer funded incentives. So if you submit a measure as part of a resource to the energy efficiency auction pilot, that measure should not be receiving, have received Save on Energy funds in the past and shouldn't be receiving Save on Energy funds in the future or other electricity funded incentives. But Enbridge and Enercan, that's fine. Other incentive sources are no problem, and resources could hypothetically be offered in a capacity auction as long as we can show that the savings are incremental. So we just don't want to be double incenting through electricity funds.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and we got one more question, but I'm going to tweak it slightly just so it's more relevant to this discussion. Christopher is talking about how in the past in Ontario, the LDCs were involved in delivering, and now it's centrally delivered through the IESO. Just curious on your thoughts on how this pilot could, is it only possible if the IESO is centrally delivering, and what kind of partnerships could you have or do you have now with some of the LDCs in the territories where you have the successful bidders?
Maybe I can start on that one. But so as you mentioned, yeah, the IESO took over the delivery of centralized programs back in 2019, and we have been leveraging a lot of the LDCs to support us through this process. I know some of our vendors are utilizing me as well. But in terms of this, this is similar to what in our framework right now, we have a local initiatives program. We're actually trying to work with local LDCs to meet specific regional needs. And that, the IESO understands the bulk system, but also can work with the utilities to adjust some of these local needs. And we're seeing some of these partnerships already. We saw it with Electra or our York Region demonstration project as well. So we're hoping we can build off these partnerships, and the LDCs have a very strong connection to the customer and the customers that they serve, where we have a more broader perspective related to the grid. So that partnership, which we're starting to see more and more, I think is a great step forward, rather than forcing LDCs to deliver this in their territory. We're actually working with those who are innovative, who want to participate, and can do so in a cost-effective manner.
Great, I appreciate that. Okay, we're going to wrap there. I just put in the chat a link to the IESO's website that has all the information you need on the pilot. We also record this webinar, and it will be available usually on Monday or Tuesday, and we can get that up and circulate it. But I'm certain that Bronwen, Katelyn, and Nick are also available for more detailed questions and answers. So feel free to reach out to them directly. If you have a hard time getting in touch with them, you can get in touch with us first. And certainly for people who are listening in from other jurisdictions, I think this is a really inspiring kind of leap of faith that the IESO has taken, and really does show its true colors around innovation. And it's very exciting. It's a first step, and first of many, I hope, especially considering how many bidders you did get. But looking at other jurisdictions and seeing, how could this be applied? I think there's, some legacy stuff that you guys are doing here. So if you're in the trenches and in the ditches trying to figure all this stuff out day to day, just know that you guys are taking a first step, and many others hopefully will follow. So thank you so much for that innovative approach, and for spending your time today on a Friday and explaining to everyone on Discovery how the auction worked. So that's it for today. And again, thanks to everyone for listening. We're here every Friday at 12 Eastern. We'll be doing this in perpetuity. So there's lots for us to learn together, and we hope that you continue to see value in it. And I hope everybody has a safe, happy, and healthy weekend. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks.